Hi, hello. My name is Phyllis and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am a 22-year-old fantasy writer of Project Wisteria. It is my West African mythologically inspired high fantasy story about two sisters, Nikola and Effie, blessed by the goddess of fate, but torn apart by death, war, and the immortal monsters called the Kindred. And the story is about them trying to find a way back to each other. So if you watched my last video, thanks so much for the support of my AuthorTube intro. Today we're going to be doing a more extended introduction to the World of Wysteria, as you can see from my desk setup behind us. I'm going to be introducing the world, introducing my two main characters, and then I'm going to be talking a little bit more of a retrospective, a little bit of a review as to why I made the characters I did, and also maybe giving some tips about making characters of your own. So if that sounds like fun to you, feel free to subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into it. So to get to know more about Effie and Nick, we have to know about where they live. So a little bit about Wysteria. It is a world torn into by conflict. 1,000 years ago, the neighboring continents and countries colonized the lands searching for the fabled fountain of youth. But when it was found, it turned men into monsters called the Kindred. Just not the men the settlers were expecting. In a bloody revolution, the scattered rebels managed to push the empires out, but since then, they've formed clans and houses that have risen and fallen in endless conflict, until one man, Jofis, said to be the first of his kind and head of the House of the Serpent, conquered neighbor after neighbor. Now, after 100 years of fighting, with the Sparrows as the last clan standing, will Wysteria finally know peace under Jofis' rule? Our girls, Nikola and Effie, are on opposite sides of this war. Nikola is part of the House of the Serpent, and Effie is part of the House of the Sparrows. As you can see from the regions, if it's got a little snake emoji next to it, it means that the House of the Serpent has control over it, and if it's got a little bird next to it, it means the House of the Sparrows over it. And as you can see, the Serpent has been busy gobbling up territories. So when we start the story, because of a plan Effie put in place, the Serpent has been forced to call a peace summit. So we start the story with Effie and a bunch of other sparrows traveling north for a peace summit. And Nikola's already in the north because she's part of the House of the Serpent. So it's important kind of to know where the layout of the land is. The Sparrows on the back foot, they are the last clan standing ahead of this avalanche of the Serpent about to take over everything. But they've been a particular like thorn in their side. So I think is important to know like the background of what's been going on in Wysteria, where we meet our characters at the start of the story, so we kind of understand how they're going to progress. And being that they're on the precipice of peace after not knowing anything else but war, it kind of colors everyone's experience in the whole story. Everyone is affected by it in some way or shape or form, and this peace summit is pretty much the last chance they have of survival. If it doesn't go well, then the stakes are incredibly high, is what I'm trying to say. Now that we've introduced the world and what's going on when we get there, let's meet Effie. I will again read an excerpt. This is the very first line of the whole manuscript, and from her point of view. It had lived 100 years and loathed every second of it until it met Amara. Meet Effie, a shape-shifting no-face, cursed by death to endure an endless cycle of rebirth and to remember her brief past lives. When she's born into the Zecora tribe of fate-gifted women, she experiences love for the first time and is freed from the grip of death. But when the Kindred invade, her family are forced to flee their home. During the escape, Effie is separated from her mother and sister by the House of the Serpent's forces, so she swears to find them and bring Jofis down. Effie is pragmatic, driven, and observant. Her flaw is that she's stubborn, she's a Taurus, and the quote that I have for her is, "You've grown and changed, but me, well, I've been stalked since the day I lost them." So her goals, as stated in her background, is to find her family, specifically her sister Amara. She's driven by a deep-seated desire to be loved and a fear of being forgotten and alone. That is a fate worse than death for her. Her long-term goal is to save her family, and her short-term goal is to use this peace summit to find out more information about what happened to them. She has a desire to hold on to the past, specifically around being loved in full for who she is. She's quite Machiavellian, so the ends justify the means is a lot of the way that she thinks about things. And so she struggles with guilt and self-doubt in doing things that maybe are not morally questionable in pursuit of her higher goal. And then she handles conflict by pushing it down and pressing on. A real Taurus, right? I'm not an astrology girly, but this story has made me one because I needed to find a different date and time. Because obviously you can't use Monday, Tuesday, July, whatever. So I had to get a little creative. So I'm a bit of an astrology girly now. Touching on her traits, Effie, for the last 10 years, so since she was separated from her family, has had the one goal to find them and get them back. That is the only thing that's been in her head for 10 years. And when I say that she has like a desire to be loved, it's because of what she is. She's an Obanje. That is a West African mythological inspired part of the story. An Obanje, which we're also calling a no-face, translates to the children who come and go. One of the most fun parts about this story in terms of like building up the world was doing a lot of research about West African mythology, specifically Igbo mythology, because I'm from Nigeria, I'm Igbo. And so it was really fun. It was really fun to get in touch with that. And a lot of myths that older cultures have was a way of them explaining things that felt unexplainable, things that were very sorrowful. So essentially when children would pass away or mothers would pass away in childbirth, they would say that the spirit was an Obanje, which is basically a spirit that's not meant to last so long. They're meant to pass away and cause sorrow. So that's kind of, that's what Effie is. And so whenever she's been found out in her past lives, she was never met with love and acceptance like she was with her mother. Like her mother knew what she was immediately once she was born, and decided to name her Ifoma, which means good thing in Igbo, specifically to tell her that the fate that you've been given of this like terrible, sorrowful thing, I'm saying now that you're not that. And she uses her powers to silence death in her voice and basically liberate her. So that feeling of being free and being loved lasted for maybe 8 years before the kindred invaded. And Effie is like striving so hard to get back that place that she was in, that love that she felt with her mom and her sister. And that's her driving force as a character. And it informs everything about her. Effie is, we said, she's pragmatic and driven and observant, but her flaw is that she's stubborn. She is a very immovable object in the sense of when she's decided on a course, she has to see it through, and she has to see it through in the exact way that she's envisioned it. I have many different types of characters, and she's one of the ones that are the most resistant to change. Adapting to a situation that's unforeseen in terms of like to her wider goal is very difficult for her, and she comes across this like spanner in the road constantly, and it's a big challenge for her character. As for her driven, obviously, to keep such a strong motivation for 10 years with pretty much no word about her mom or her sister takes incredible drive and incredible focus. How she joined up with the Sparrows was in pursuit of her larger goal, because she believes that her mother and her sister were either taken or harmed by the serpent. The best person to join would be the House of the Sparrow, their enemies. So that's what she went to go and do. She's observant. She's basically almost always playing a role, because she's trying to get as much information as possible. She's trying to weave through as many like things as she can, because it's all in pursuit of her larger goal. So everything that she does is all in pursuit of her larger goal. She will use whoever she needs to use, because to her it's like, you're not the people, you're not my people, you know? Even when she joins up with the Sparrows, as you can see, her class is that she's a foreigner. Wysteria is full of many different types of people, different ethnicities, different types of, like it's a very blended culture that's inspired by my experiences growing up in London, being a very diverse city. However, not to say that there are not prejudices. After escaping the serpent's forces, she fled down south to the city of Orzor. Orzor is the one city that you can see that has both a sparrow and a serpent emoji, because it is a shared space. It has shared power. 200 years before the start of the story, Orzor was under the control of the House of the Lion, and the serpent and the sparrow combined their forces to take the lion down. So now, even though they're at war, Orzor remains as a dual-loyaled city, and it gives them some freedoms where other regions don't have the same freedoms. It's a very popular place for the gifted to live, because, how do I put into words? There are two types of gifted. There are just the regular gifted, and then there are the fake gifted. Both Nikola and Effie are the fake gifted. The gifted are usually from Eudoxia or have Eudoxian ancestry. Eudoxia is a continent to the south of Wysteria. Because they need access to, there's a bit of discrimination that goes on for them, but all you need to know is that there are lots of gifted in Orzor. That's like their favorite city. So when Effie goes and joins up with the ranks of the Sparrows, they are not as welcoming, because she's still a foreigner within their lands, even though she joined up when she was like 16 or 15 years old. They recruited her from the academy that she went to. She was so excellent at her gifted powers that they gave her a full scholarship. One of Effie's nicknames is Fate Seer. Fate gifted are split into 5 categories. In order of power, there are conjurers, shifters, summoners, renders, and seers. Effie is a seer. Technically, she's not a seer, she's actually only a fate shifter, but she's been lying. A fate shifter is somebody who can shift their form into pretty much anything. People are not as familiar with fake gifted. They're more familiar with the gifted and they get them a bit confused, and I'm going to explain the difference. So the gifted are magic users who have to call on the power of gods to use their power. So they have to pray, they have to give tribute, they have to do a lot of sacrifice to appease a god to be able to call on their power. And sometimes it doesn't work, it depends on how the god's feeling that day. But the fake gifted are distinctly different because they are descendant from the mother goddess Ani. It means that they have an innate power within them. It's scalable, they can technically master all 5 forms of the fake gift, but it takes a lot of practice. And because the girls were cut off from the rest of their family, they don't have tutors. So there's a wealth of information that they were cut off from when they had to leave, because the fake gifted pride themselves in educating their young themselves and spending a long time in illustrious study. They're like scholars, right? Their whole thing is mastering things and then passing them on to their daughters. They're a tribe of all women. When you see some of the flashbacks, you'll see what their life was like. Effie calls their home the garden. It's literally like a secret garden in the midst of the mountain region of Tramage. So there's like a barrier inside the garden. It's sunny, there's red sand, it's beautiful and luscious, and directly outside the garden, it's barren, cold, and snowy, and it's separated by like a magical barrier, basically. And that's where she lived. She calls that the garden, and that was just a place of freedom and beauty. But when they were chased out, they were separated from that history. So both Nikola and Effie are cut off from the people that can teach them more about their gift. So Effie kind of has capped out at being a fate shifter. But to make herself useful to the sparrows, she had to lie and say that she's a fate seer. And so this is the thing that she feels the worst about. So that's Effie. Let's move on to Nikola. So her first line is, "All alone Nikola stood in an endless field of snow, more red than white." Meet Nikola, the sheltered daughter of the Serpent King. She has a gift she doesn't quite understand and fractured memories that haunt her dreams. 10 years ago, she was the lone survivor of a kindred attack and lost all her memories. Cain and Jofis, head of the House of the Serpent, found her and raised her as his own and his first heir in 1,000 years. And ever since she understood what war was, the princess has pushed for peace to protect her loved ones. When her sworn guards are to be sent to the front lines, everything changes. Now she must do all she can to become stronger and protect them herself. Nikola is analytical, empathetic, and personable. Her flaws is that she's idealistic, her sign is that she's a Cancer, and the quote that we've got is, "I haven't lost my kin to the war, and I don't intend to start. So yes, while I care nothing for you, if a marriage means our realm will be at peace, then I will grin and bear it." She's book smart, but she has a naive idealism, so her beliefs are constantly challenged by other characters and situations. She handles the conflicts by studying, gathering more information before asking questions and deciding to act. Why she acts the way that she does is around guilt, love, and trauma. She has survivor's guilt from the attack that she survived as a child and trauma from that, so she tries to hold the people that she loves very dear and close to her. Her character goals overall is that she wants to protect her sworn guards, who she refers to as her kin. And just as an aside, in Wysteria, there's a lot of found family. Most people don't really have children biologically, so because of course they have mortality. Like if you're immortal, you don't need biological children, but if you want to carry on a legacy or you adopt kids, and there's a very specific way of doing it that pays respect to the laws that they have in place and the creeds that they have in place. So it's very much they are very invested in the people that they call their kin. She's driven by fear of death, of course. Her long-term goal is to become stronger by mastering her gift, and her short-term goal is to ensure the success of the peace summit and bring the war to an end. So Nick is pretty sheltered. When I say sheltered, it's not like she's unaware of things. She can wax poetic about philosophical ideas of the sages, the myths, the histories. She can go on and on about that. But in terms of actual street smarts, there's a bit of a gap in her knowledge of that. And when she meets other characters as well, this becomes a glaringly obvious thing. So analytical is about her love for knowledge and learning more. Empathetic is, of course, more to do with how she feels about other people. She's a very kind person. She spends most of her days, a regular day for her, even during the war, would have been mostly within the palace studying, and then every Sabbath she would go to the temple to do charity, to pray, to be amongst the common folk. So she's a very empathetic person, and she's personable, so she knows how to manage navigate high society. She's very good at talking, and she's very good at navigating knowing what's expected of her and weaving things with her words. But she's also quite emotional, so she's not very good at hiding her emotions in the same way Effie is. It very much shows all over her when she feels a certain way, which is why she usually wears a veil in public. her flaw around being idealistic. All it means is that she has a very rose-colored idea of life. She's a bit naive in that way, and because of her idealism and pretty much always wanting like the best things to happen and turn out, when negative things happen, things that are inexplicably unfair in a way that she wasn't expecting, or unjust in a way that she wasn't expecting, it takes her a while to recover from that. Because despite the circumstances of her becoming a princess and becoming the heir of the House of the Serpent, largely the system has worked for her. She sees the flaws within the system, but is very much navigating within it because she's been at the epicenter of power for the last 10 years, which is in her head most of her life. And her father saved her from, I guess, dying in the snow during the kindred attack. So that's her perspective. So she thinks that they're just tweaks that can be made to the system and things will change. And her idealism knocks smack head against people like Effie and other characters in the story that she ends up meeting in her pursuit of knowledge that make her question that. Where Effie was a very active person in the war, Nick, for her, the war was happening over there, somewhere down south, right? The only time it became real for her, and not just, like, it wasn't like it wasn't real, she did still push for peace in a more like, why are we still fighting type thing. The first time that that really smacks her right in the face is when her sworn guards tell her that, yeah, we're going to be sent to the front lines. I'll get into them later on. She loves them down. They've known each other since they were children. Her and her sworn guards pretty much come from a similar background of being the victim of kindred attacks, and being taken in by a noble family. Where her sworn guards were taken in by the military, people affiliated with that, it means that their position is a little bit lower than hers, whereas her position is kind of crafted especially for her, because King Jofis has not had an heir his entire, like, 1,000 years of life, pretty much. So she is a unique position. Everyone doesn't really know what to do with her. They don't know where her power stops and ends, and she doesn't either. But she tries to use whatever influence that she can use to protect the people that she loves. There's a barrier to her just telling her father, can you just not send my sworn guards? Because Wysteria has a very particular mentality around strength and weakness. It's part of one of the themes of the story. It would not show well for her sworn guards to dodge duty, like to dodge the front lines. Like, it would look bad. And also, how could they be her sworn guards if they are too afraid to fight on the front lines for the Empire, right? She can't just get out of this by talking. She can't just get out of this through debate. That she has to find a new way to save her friends, and the way that she decides to do that is by pushing for peace, is doing everything she can to make the peace summit a success. So, like, in the first chapter for Nick, you actually she learns about the peace process, and her father kind of says that, hey, there might be a marriage in play, and she just kind of rolls her eyes at that. It's like, whatever. The reason why it's like whatever is because, well, they don't really have to, like, they never say that she has to do it. Like, it's not like a marriage will happen, it's just that it could be a potential, and so she kind of just accepts that and shrugs it off. But the second she hears that her sworn guards are the people who are going to be sent to the front lines is when it becomes, like, completely real for her. She's a fate summoner. She's not lying this time. That's actually her gift. It's essentially somebody who's able to summon things from the past, present, and future. Usually it's weapons. We have weapons in this story called divine artifacts. Those are things that are able to kill the kindred. So because of her gift of being a fate summoner, she often goes to temple. The faith in this story is called the Sisterhood of the Seer. So she usually goes there to hear the audiences of the common folk to help them solve their problems. So she knows that, like, loads of people have been dying. But the second it becomes real for her is when her sworn guards, the people that she's known since she was 9, since she came to the palace, that's when it becomes, like, immensely real for her, and she decides that she'll do what she can to save them. So let's talk a little bit about my intention around these characters. My idea around plot is that plot is not just what your characters do. Plot are the actions your characters take that relate to the themes of the story. So there are actions that your characters take before the kickoff of the story that may just be that you might have them have an action that is indicative of the character journey. So, for example, at the very start of the story, Nikola does a very innocuous action of not listening to an authority figure, and that was just a little bit of a sneak peek of the journey she's going to be on for the rest of her story. As well as for Effie, there's a little bit of doubt that she has around her course of action, and that's going to also be a significant part of her story. So those actions are not, like, plot relevant, they're more character relevant. When I say plot relevant, I mean what it relates to as the main themes of the story. So my main themes of the story are strength and weakness as it relates to power and injustice, order and chaos as it relates to peace and war, and life and death as it relates to immortality and legacy. And I can go in depth about my themes, on my ideas around that, on what influenced those themes and why I find them so interesting. But I'm going to direct it towards why I created the characters that I did. I find it very interesting to have insider-outsider characters who are maybe accepted in certain ways and not accepted in other ways. I'm always very interested to explore the different dimensions of power. For example, like in sociology, we have a concept called intersectionality, and talks about the different spheres of systems that affect different people if they have like a compounded amount of those. So for example, if you are in a society where you are marginalized on multiple fronts, there are multiple systems of power that affect your life on the day-to-day that may not affect somebody who maybe has two things or one thing. So all my characters are in different buckets like that. They may be winning in certain aspects or aligned with the culture in one aspect and not aligned in other aspects. So it kind of makes their acceptance conditional in a way, conditioned on different factors that are kind of out of their control. So when I was creating Effie as a character and why I decided to introduce the world through her. Firstly, I wanted to explore African mythology, so Obanje, No Faces, that was really fun. But another point was because the prologue is in her point of view and she is a baby. And if she wasn't Obanje, I don't even know how it would work because she has to be conscious and precocious to kind of understand that the situation that she's in is very abnormal, and for her to be able to introduce Wysteria as an abnormal place, to introduce the Zecora as an abnormal meaning like as not typical, right? That there's something distinctive about them. And so I thought that it's the easiest shorthand. And another reason why I introduced the story through Effie's point of view is because I believe that the reader and your main characters, the distance between them and their knowledge should be as close as possible. There are drafts of the story that I start from Nikola's point of view, and it does not work because there's so much more that I have to explain for you to get on the same page that I am. The reason why is because Nikola is already immersed in her society, so she wouldn't be thinking about larger concepts in the same way that Effie, like it would take her longer to explain things than Effie can, because Effie is somebody who's on the outside coming into a society, just like the reader is an outsider coming into the society and learning about it. So Effie was an easier vehicle to tell things about the story, to set up the conflict, to talk about, because she is the eyes and ears everywhere, right? So I believe like the distance between the characters should be as close as possible. I also am a very big fan of bookish characters, competent characters, and characters with consistent motivations that kind of infect everything about their life. So Effie and Nick are both kind of scholarly, but they have knowledge in different fronts. I also think that there are different types of intelligence that I wanted to showcase. For example, Nick is very good at emotional intelligence. She's very good at social intelligence, knowing how to navigate situations. And that shows up in different ways. And that form of intelligence is also a form of strength. I also, on the larger front, was thinking about in a fantasy society where immortality is a real thing, where magic is a real thing, how do you regulate such beings? How do you form a society where everyone, like what sort of social contract would you strike up, right? That would make everyone fall in line? And what happens when that social contract is broken? So a form of a social contract is a sociological idea. Essentially, it's like what a society owes you. If you follow the laws, if you pay your taxes, if you do what you're meant to do, or live up to the societal ideals, what does the society give you back in return? And that social contract is something that we kind of all agree to by following the laws, by doing what we're meant to do. But it's also enforced under the threat of violence, by which we mean the monopoly the state has on violence. What we mean by that is if you don't pay your taxes, if you break the law, you're in prison. That's a form of violence, for example. There are other ways that the social contract is enforced, but the best society, or the perfect society, the mythical society, is one in which everyone agrees to the social contract and lives with it. So when I was thinking about, okay, if I'm going to make these concepts real, like giving kindred, who are immortal monsters, and this society, most of the upper classes and the people in power are kindred, how am I regulating them? If I have magic gifted people, how am I regulating them? And I can get a little bit more into how the regular gifted, I say regular gifted, but how the gifted are regulated. And that's to do with the sisterhood and the faith, because as I said before, the gifted are connected to their gift through worship, prayer, and tribute. And that's heavily regulated on which gods they're allowed to worship, which gods they can't. And I can explain that later on when we talk more about a gifted character that's just regular gifted, not fake gifted, but it's not as relevant right now because our girls are fake gifted, so they don't have to pray to anyone. But yeah, so when I was thinking about the like ripple consequences of making such concepts real, that was why I ended up thinking about these characters. With Nick's backstory, that's an explicit time where the social contract is broken. What are the consequences of that? You know, ... With Effie's character, her strive within peace and war and how there are different spheres of conflict and order, that's also something to do with her character as well. And regulating such strong characters with like inhuman powers, I also wanted to create problems that they cannot solve through like punching their way through. Like bureaucratic problems. Like you're not going to end a war by killing someone, right? You're not going to end a war by punching things up. You kind of have to agree to a treaty. Every conflict has never been like solved through violence. It's always solved through a consent, through a treaty, right? So I wanted to create real problems that they couldn't just magic their way out of, real barriers to entry of things, and real, like one of the character conflicts they have is trying to find traveling papers to enter a city. Which I find quite fun. Another problem they have when they're traveling up north, this isn't really a spoiler, it's just quite fun. I like them being a bit scrappy, but the envoy that Effie is traveling with, so they actually run out of money, and because they're at war and their coffers are like depleted because of a blockade that the serpents put on them, they kind of don't have money. So they have to work through poor planning, but also because of the blockade of the war. The Sparrow King can't send any money, and they're just poor, right? So they have to get jobs when they get into the capital. It's a scramble for their life trying to make it up north, and that's a problem that cannot be solved through punching people. It's a problem that cannot be solved through magic either. It's something that they have to use their wits about them, the skills that they have to make up the difference, right? So I was quite interested in that sort of aspect of it. That's the larger reason why I created these characters the way that I did, and the thought process I had around having these two girls be our entry into the story. I have two other point of view characters that I'll be introducing later on. Yeah, there are our focal point of views. Not everyone has equal weight in the point of views, but them two are pretty evened out. So that's it for me. I think this is a point where we shall say goodbye. But thanks so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Wysteria, about Nikola and Effie. I hope that you are interested to learn a little bit more about who they are. And this was a nice introduction to them. It was actually quite a struggle to film this because I had to really toil over how I was going to introduce them to you guys and what would be the best entry and what would be the best way of conveying the messages around them, but I hope I did an okay job. And of course, I love them down. I hope that you will grow to love them too, and you'll love to see and follow along their journey. But yeah, this is the point where we say goodbye. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked the video, please leave a comment and subscribe. If you made it all the way to the end, leave a bird or sparrow emoji, because you know our sparrows are really hanging in there. Okay, it's a tough war. You know, let's root for our underdog. Like, come on, you know. Leave a sparrow emoji and answer this question. What makes a compelling character to you? If you enjoyed this video and want to hang out with me more, I want to hang out with you, so subscribe. And I will catch you in the next video next week, where we will go over, I think that we'll talk about character work, because I got some questions from, I got a question from one of you lovely people about how I do dialogue and how I do character development. So since I've introduced my two main characters, I think that it would be good to do a video around character development and character creation and like how to do it. And maybe I could even do stuff on starting your first chapter or starting the first page and character work. So if that sounds like fun, also drop some questions that you might have about character work, and I can answer them in the next video as well. I'll leave all my socials down below. Follow me on Blue Sky. Sometimes I post excerpts there. And follow me on my Instagram, on my TikTok. You know what to do. I know you're smart. You got this, babe. It's been lovely hanging out with you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.